Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today I'm going to talk about why the active camera node in Geometry Nodes is now my favorite node. Let's jump in. Okay, so here we are in Blender, and I've got this scene from a couple of weeks ago. We made this little scene when we did our realism, 3 tips for realism, and it's looking cool, it's great, but I want to put a few more angles into this, and I also want to make some changes to each of those different angles that are specific to the angle of the camera. Now, this is something that happens a lot, right? You'll come up with this if you're doing sequences where you've got multiple camera cuts and you're using your timeline for it. Often you'll get to a point where you create a cool camera and you need to move something just to get it to look right in that new camera. So let's actually do that. I'm going to start making this. First, I'm going to rename some of these collections and clean it up. So let's go ahead and start off by binding a camera to the timeline. So if you're not familiar with what this does, basically it allows you to cut between different cameras on your timeline. It's a very great technique in Blender. So let's give this camera a specific name. We'll just call this camera 01. And we're going to come down here to the graph editor or the timeline or the dope sheet. I'll switch to the dope sheet so it's a little bit clearer. And I'm going to hit Control B with my mouse down here. And that will bind the camera to a marker. Now, the manual way of doing this is to go to the marker menu, and you can just select bind cameras to markers. You can see the hotkey there, Control B. And this will take whatever camera is selected and it will bind it to the timeline here. And the effect of this is that this will be the active camera. So I'm going to go here, right? And let's Shift D to duplicate. I'll call this camera 2. Now with this camera, I'm going to make sure I've got it selected. We've got camera 2 here. I'm going to delete all the keys from this camera, and then I'm going to look through it by clicking on the little green camera icon, and then Control B, and I'm going to bind this camera to the timeline. Now, it's a little confusing because I haven't changed the camera at all, so let me just move this camera a bit. Maybe we'll make this like a close-up. We like look down at the guy or something. Maybe use a longer lens, like a 75 or something. Push in a bit. And then I'm going to change my focus to be manual so I can actually focus properly. Go. Maybe expand my f-stop so I've got a little bit more room there. So we've got this shot. Looks cool. And so I've got camera 1, camera 2. And you can see here, as I move between these on my timeline, it's cutting between camera 1 and camera 2. Right? So that's awesome. That's working really great. And then let's say he turns and looks this way, and then let's have Shift D again. We're going to create another camera, camera 3. I will look through that camera, and I'll just reposition this. Maybe we'll go low angle or something, or just go way back. So now you can see I haven't bound camera 3 to my timeline. It's not here. So as soon as I move the timeline, pop, I'm going to pop back into camera 2. And you can see which one's active by looking at the little green icon next to the camera name. So I'm going to select this camera. Now notice you can, if I click this to jump back to look into the view, naturally it's not going to affect the timeline. But if I'm not looking through it, but I have it selected, I can come down here and Control B, and it will actually bind it to the camera that's selected. So it's not necessarily the active camera, it's the camera that's selected. So that can be a bit confusing sometimes if you've got a different camera selected from the one you're looking through and you think you're binding it to the one that's active. So just bear in mind, it's whatever's selected. You can also bind it to like anything. So if I select this and Control B, we're now bound to the dude, and we're now suddenly looking through the floor. So naturally that's not what we want to do. Yeah. Anyways, so it's all looking good. The couple of hotkeys I recommend as well. We come to marker. We've got jump to previous and next marker. I like to use Shift up arrow and Shift down. So if you right click, you can change the shortcut on these guys. And I use that to quickly jump between these cuts, a lot like like an editing software. So, all right. So I've got some cameras, got some crazy cameras. Now, let's say we want to change some things. Okay, so I'm over here, right? And I've got this shot and I like it. But in this shot, I don't like the background. I'm like, it's not as good. So a very common thing that we do in films is to make a tweak. So you come over and you change the view. You might find a better view. You might go, okay, I like a bit of this, or maybe it's nice with this in the foreground, a little bit of that there. And now I want to put my guy, over here. So I need to move him so that he fits in the shot, right? So let me we won't do a massive tweak. I'll just come over a little bit. So let's say I want to come over here just a bit. So I've got a bit more green in my shot. So now I've got the situation where I need to animate his position over. So I could come over to this shot right here and say, okay, I'm going to set a keyframe for the armature position on this guy. So I'm going to hit I here to set keyframe for the location and the rotation. I'll go to the next shot and I will move him over. Let me get a second view so it's a bit easier to manage. There we go. So let's grab this. There we go. So I'm just going to move him over like this, right? So that's where I want him for this shot. So I've got a little bit of a nicer composition, a little bit better with some green, right? Now I can set a new keyframe right here for this. So now when I cut, you know, I can't see the change. I can't see the move. If you look over in this view, you can see that he's doing the hop over to the new spot, but we can't see it through our camera. So when we render, we're good to go. But there might be situations where you're like, you know, I really want to render the whole scene from this camera's perspective. If I do that, and I come over here and I, you know, get rid of this camera. So if I mute that camera there. Now, as I push in, if I'm looking at this view, you can see when we get to here, he's going to do this jump, right? So now this keyframe is no longer helping me, it's hurting me. So I lose the flexibility to render anything from any camera outside of the bounds of the markers. And when you're working with an editor, that can be really difficult because you want to be able to shoot stuff where you've got handles, you've got extra bits of footage to send over. So I'm going to show you a super cool workaround with geometry nodes. So I'm going to undo that. I'm bringing my camera back and got everything working good. That's great. Now I'm going to get rid of this change. So I'm going to come over here to his default position and I'm going to delete these keyframes. So I'm going to clear keyframes, clear keyframes. So we're back to what we had before. It doesn't line up in this shot anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new collection and we're going to maintain a new collection for all this so that we can just kind of keep things organized and understand what we're doing. So I'm going to click the little plus icon and I'm going to create a collection here called, let's see, shot adjustments. I'll just do ADJ for adjustments. So shot adjust, and in this collection, I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to create a mesh. Let's see, what do I want to create? I'm going to create a mesh plane. Okay, I'm going to zero out its position. So it's at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to go into edit mode with this guy. In fact, first I'm going to hit the backslash on my number keypad. That will isolate the view on this object, hide everything else. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to reduce him down to only 3 vertexes. All right, now I'm going to make this into a triangle. I only want 3 vertexes in this mesh. So I'm going to hit F3 and I'm going to type in, there it is, triangulate faces. Do that. That will cut a slice right through the middle. And I'm going to grab this vertex and hit X to delete. And there we go. So now I've got these 3 vertexes. This object right here is going to be the object that will control the changes. Now, I want this to be the one that controls. We're going to do this like once for every object that we want to have a little adjustment for. That's going to be the best way to manage this. So I'm going to name this object the same as my character. So I'm going to call this dude. And I'll just type in ADJ. So dude adjustment. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take dude. I'll get out of this isolated view. And I'm going to put dude adjustment right here wherever he is. So I'm going to Shift S and cursor to selected. That'll put the 3D cursor right there. I'm going to grab dude adjust and Shift S selection to cursor. So now he's right here on top. Now he's really big in comparison to him. So I might just go into edit mode and just shrink this down a little bit. Actually, if I want to do that, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it. It's cool. So I've got dude adjustment here. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to parent my armature dude to this adjustment object. And this thing is going to move him around and reposition him on a per shot basis. But there's a catch. I don't want to just do the normal parent. I don't want to just, you know, control click here and then control P to parent. And now he's parented to the object. I need to parent him to the vertexes that are inside this object. So what we're going to do is follow this step. We're going to grab dude. We're going to control click the dude adjustment object. We're going to come into our 3D viewport, hit tab to go into edit mode. And that puts us in edit mode for the active object, or actually for all the objects that are selected. But anyways, so we're going to take these vertexes. We hit A to select those vertexes. And these, so we have 3 selected right now. And I'm going to hit Control P and we're going to parent, make vertex parent. Okay, Now, let me explain what's going on here. I'm going to leave edit mode, go back to object mode. So what we've done is we've parented the armature that's controlling our character's mesh to the vertexes inside the dude adjustment object. So he's not parented to the object itself, he's parented actually to the vertexes. So anything we do to these vertexes in edit mode is going to affect him. I can show you that. If I select this, I can grab this and move him around. He's going to follow it. But now I can also go into edit mode and hit A to select all the vertexes, and I can grab them and he's still going to follow. I could grab one of these guys and he's still going to follow. You can see he preserves the angle of the mesh as well. So one of the reasons why we created a 3 vertex mesh like this was because you can parent an object to any set of vertexes as long as you have 1 selected, 2 selected, or 3 selected. You can't go higher than that. And those 3 give a triangulated position, basically, that it can be parented to. So it will maintain its relationship to these 3 vertexes, however they get adjusted and changed. Now, the reason why we're parenting him to the mesh, the actual vertexes, instead of to the object itself, is because we're going to be controlling where these vertexes are, not the object, the vertexes, with geometry nodes. So geometry nodes isn't able to take the object and like move its origin around, right? And we can have the parented thing follow it. It's only able to take the actual mesh itself and change the mesh. So that's how we're doing it this way. Hope that makes sense. Just stick with me. You'll see how this all fits together when we come to the end. So I've got my dude adjustment object. I'm going to go down to my modifiers tab, and I'm going to click add modifier and add a geometry nodes modifier. I'm also going to come up here, and I want to keep my dope sheet. So I'm going to split my view here, and whoops, I had another view already. So I'm going to come down and bring this up, and I'll switch this to geometry nodes. And we're going to select this. Here we go. So I'm going to click new to create a new geometry node system, and I'll call this shot adjustments. Okay. Now let's talk about what this is doing. I'm going to isolate my view again. So we're just looking at this triangle object. So this is the object that has the geometry nodes system on it. And what's happening is the mesh, these 3 vertexes, are coming in to the group input, and they're being piped over to the group output. So that's why we're seeing it. If we were to unplug this, they would disappear because we're no longer, displaying it. You also see our character flips up onto the side. So we'll bring it back. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say, okay, let's take the new node, my new favorite node, the active camera node. So let's come over here and grab active camera. So Shift A, and then we can get active camera. This node will give us whatever camera is the active camera on our timeline. Now, I want to say, all right, let's take a specific camera. I want to make this adjustment here on camera 2. So let's go to camera 2. And I'll just come here and I'll click the little thumbtack icon that will pin this geometry nodes view so it stays up even when I select other things. And I'm going to grab camera 2 and drag it into my geometry nodes setup. And this will give me an object info node. You can easily get these. Just type in object info and you can put any info in it. Little shortcut is just dragging them in. So I can now take the location, rotation, scale, whatever of this camera object. And I'm just going to use the location for this trick. I'm going to use it to compare with the location of the active camera. I'm going to see if they match, right? Because if the active camera's location matches perfectly the location of this particular camera, it means that that camera's the active camera, right? Any other camera is not going to have the same location. So that's a good way of testing to see, are we looking through this particular camera at this moment? So let's do a little test for that. So we're going to come over here and we're going to type in compare. We're going to grab a compare node, and we want to compare vectors, okay? A location is a vector, right? Come over here to the transform, and you'll see we've got X, Y, and Z, a set of 3 numbers, and that's the set of 3 numbers that makes up the location vector. So I'm going to take the active camera, plug it in. Actually, first I need to get the information about the active camera. So we need to grab the location of it. So I'm going to actually just grab another object info node, and I'll get rid of the camera from that. And I'm going to plug the active camera into this orange input here. So now this is going to grab the information about this active camera. So I'll take the location, I'll plug it in here, and I'll take the location of this one, and I'll plug it in here. And we're going to switch this from greater than to equal. And the epsilon, we can leave that really small. 0.001 will be fine, because again, we're looking for an exact match. Now, if they match, this is going to output a 1 or true. If they don't match, it's going to output a 0 or false. Now we can test this by saying, let's grab a transform geometry, all right? And we're going to say, all right, we'll take this result and plug it into the scale. So the scale of this geometry node's dude adjustment object is going to be 0 if we are not looking through this camera. If we are, the scale will be 1 because the result is a 1, right? And you can see he's here, he's looking fine, but then when I scrub back, he's not disappearing, he's flipping up into the sky. But that's fine, that's fine. We're not worried about that yet. You can see that there's a change. If I unplug this, he goes back to normal and there is no change. So, all right, so we got our equals working. Now, we're going to use this transform geometry node. So I'll leave this here. And we want to basically transform the position of our dude adjustment object by a certain amount. So we want to set it to a new translation, basically. So what we need to do is get that. We need to get another object that's going to be that position in 3D space. Now I'm going to hit the # key on my number keypad just to clear my isolated view. And I'm going to go to my camera and I'm going to decide where I want this guy to be. So I'm going to see, I'll select his armature and I'll Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'll go Shift A and I will create an empty right here. And this empty is going to be the empty that controls the position. And I'm going to call this dude. Let's see, what do I want to call this? Adjust, and I'll call this camera 02. So this is so that I know this is the adjustment for this guy when camera 2 is live. Okay, so I'm going to move this over just a little bit, maybe right here. I'm just guessing at this point. And I'm going to take this object and bring it into here. So I have another object info node. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to create a switch. So let's create a switch node. Just type in switch. And we want to set this to vector. Okay. And I'll take the result and I'll plug it into the switch. So basically this is saying, all right, if it's true, so if this is a 1, we're going to output this value from here. If it's not a 1, if it's 0, if it's false, we're going to output this value. So we have 2 different values. And I can plug this output into the translation. So right now it's not going to do anything because true and false are both 0. And if we're not transforming this geometry at all, we're just leaving it, it's going to stay at its position that it already exists at. Okay, but we can take this adjustment and we can take the location and we can plug it into true. And now he's going to move to the location of this object. But little catch, you can see he's disappeared. He's like way over here. So what we want to do is not use original, we want to use relative. So it needs to be relative to, basically just compensates for the fact that this has already been moved, right, off the origin. That's what relative is doing. So anyways, you set that to relative. So the object for the adjustment object, make sure that's set to relative. And we've got this over here. Now, wherever I move it, you can see he's going to move too. So we can get him in the right spot. Right about there is where we wanted him. That's great. And now you can see when I cut away from this, he looks like he's in the right spot both times. Okay. And if I come over here and I get rid of this camera like we did before, delete that marker, and I scrub, he no longer hops. Likewise, if I undo that camera, and we can see he does the little jump now again. And again, if we get rid of this camera, and I scrub back, he's going to stay in the correct position. Awesome. All right, great. So now this thing is working. So we've got this shot adjuster. And likewise, if we move the camera marker anywhere else, that adjustment is going to be maintained. So now we can keep the adjustment linked to the camera indefinitely, no matter where that camera goes. Now, this is all really good. This is kind of cool, but it's a little bit cumbersome to work with. You don't want to have to be jumping into geometry nodes like this all the time. So let's simplify this a little bit so that we've got a bit of a UI to interact with. So I'm going to come over to the dude adjustment object. I'll go to the tab for geometry nodes, and I'll just make a little bit more room here for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some new inputs. So we're going to leave the active camera here, but for this one, where we have camera 2, I'm going to take this second grayed out output from the group input node, and I'm going to drag it over and I'm going to plug it into here. And you'll see what that does is in our geometry nodes object, we now have this input called object. Okay, and we can rename that. So let's call this camera, or I'll call this active camera. There we go. So when the active camera is camera 02, what do we want to do? Well, we want to put him in the position of this thing. So this is the adjustment. So let's do this again. We'll grab this next gray one and put that there. And now we've got this object one. We're going to double click that, and we'll call this transform adjust. So again with the ADJ, just so it's clear. So transform adjustment and active camera. So whenever this camera is active, we're going to move this object to where this transformer is. And now, because this is a geometry node system, what I can do is I can stack multiples of this on top of each other. So let's make another one. I'm going to come here, I'm going to add a modifier, add a geometry nodes modifier. I'm going to grab my shot adjustment and I'm going to clear it. All right, so this one's not doing anything now. And now I'm going to say, all right, in camera 3, I actually want to put him somewhere else. So I'm going to duplicate this and I'll call this camera 3. And I'll take this camera and I'm going to move it. I'll move it right up quite close, maybe to the camera a bit. And let's see, I'll take my dude adjustment and I'll say, all right, when the active camera is camera 3, I want to transform to the position of, where is he? Dude adjust camera 3. There we go. You can see he's come right up close to camera. Looks a bit ridiculous. So let's grab that and let's actually find a better shot for it. So maybe I'll put him like right here. Maybe we just want to tweak him over a little bit. Now, if I want to rotate him, I've got a slight problem. You can see no rotations are going through. So we need to add that functionality in. So let's put this position here. Let's say we want him kind of up close like this, let's say. And I'll take my camera as well, and I'm going to adjust my focus so that we're focused on him a bit better. There we go. Looking good. Now, another thing is we're actually seeing the triangle mesh, which we don't want. So I'm going to go over here to the dude adjustment object, and I'll go down to viewport display, and I'm going to set this to bounds, and that will just show a bounding box for the object. You can see it there, and that makes it not show up in our viewport render. All right. So now we've got 2 adjustments working for us at the same time, which is really cool. So by just stacking these modifiers one on top of the other, we can end up with lots of different adjustments on each one. I can even name these after the cameras that they relate to. So I could come over here and I could say, all right, this one is, that's camera 2, and this is camera 3. All right, so let's add in rotations. How would we do that? Well, what we want to do is we want to take the this object info node, and we want to take this rotation output and use it to adjust the rotation of our geometry. So let's take another switch node, duplicate this, bring the result down because we want to use the same result. And again, we're going to plug this into the true value. And instead of vector, we want to switch this to a rotation. So it's a different type. You can see the color changes and it matches this sort of light pink of the rotation. So for true, we're going to put that in there. And then this output, we're going to plug into, plug that into the rotation node. There we go. Cool. So now if I'm on camera 2, if I go to my camera 2 adjustment and I rotate, you can see that it's going to effectively rotate him. So we've got a little bit more control. So I can maybe adjust this a little bit, give him a little bit of rotation like that. And then I'll go to camera 3. And let's say camera 3, we want to rotate him off just a little bit off axis so it looks right. Okay, great. So I've got my 3 cameras now and I've got my adjustments. You can see how then I could just keep stacking this up. And this works for anything. So I could use this with a light. Like I could come over here and say, all right, let's create a new light. Let's see, I'll give it a point light here, bring it up here next to him, give it like a cool, I don't know, orange color or something. And like wherever this light is, you can see as he moves, this light's not really going to track with him. He's going to be lit differently each time. But let's say I want this to stay with him. I could literally just parent this to the mesh of this, or I could make a new adjustment for it. Say I just want to have this light in this shot. So I could come over here to dude adjustment. I could duplicate it, and I call this point adjust. And then what I could do again is grab point, control click point adjust, go into edit mode, hit A to select all the vertexes, control P, make vertex parent, go back out of edit mode. And now with this one, I could come down to the geometry nodes objects. And let's say for shot number 2, I could say, you know what? I don't want to create an empty. I just want to shoot this thing through the floor. So I can create another output. So I could say, all right, what if we had an output that wasn't an object and we just want to output like a vector? So what I could do with that is I could say, all right, let's grab a, create a vector math node right here. And we could say, all right, we're going to add this new vector to whatever vector we've already got. So I can plug this one in right here. And now we've got this extra vector. And what we want to do is if this is true, then let's see, what is it? We're going to grab that as the position. So should be able to do that and that. There we go. So now I've got this extra little vector math node here. So I can just have an adjustment here. I can call this, let's see. Transform adjustment 2. And so this one could be like an extra level. So what I could do is I could get rid of this and just say, all right, when we have camera 2 as the active shot, I'm going to shoot this thing through the floor. So I'm going to go negative 1000. So it's going to go way down on the Z. So if I come here and we go to this point, you can see that light just disappears. And if we want to see where it went, I can go over here, grab that point light. And there it is right here. Zoom out. And when we cut, it's like, where is it? It's way down there. 1000 is a bit extreme. So this is a great little system for easily adjusting things. And you can see, because they all live in their own collection, I can actually just deactivate this to keep it out of my scene so I don't have to worry about it. And now I can just shoot my scene and make adjustments and animate everything as I want to, and it will automatically keep up as I cut between my different cameras. Now, what's really cool about this is I could say, all right, I'm done here. I'm done with my sequence. I've finished my shots, and now I want to render all this out, but I just want to render each camera, and I'm going to render them out for the whole timeline, right? So if I can come up here to my scene, I can click the little double paper icon and create a linked copy. And what this does is it creates 2 versions of your scene that are linked. So everything's the same in the both of them, and if you change it in one, it'll change it in the other. But one thing that isn't linked and intentionally not linked are the markers. So I can come here and delete the markers from scene.01. And you can see if I go back to scene, they're still there, right? But if I made another change, like I moved this plant, right? So that he's like rotated like this, and I come into scene 1, you'll see that that plant is rotated there as well. So the position of things, the data blocks are all linked, but so let's undo that silliness. There we go. Back to scene 1. So now what this allows me to do is I can just pick whatever camera I want to look through. So I can just go, okay, I'm going to look through this camera, and now my timeline isn't going to override it. And I'm just going to be able to render my whole shot from this perspective. I can switch here. Ta-da! There we go. Looking great. I can switch to this one now. Ta-da! Looking great. Awesome. So it's all working together, and I've got ultimate flexibility to craft sequences however I want. Super cool. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and really learned a lot. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, do all that stuff. Check out Patreon. We've got the uncut version of all the tutorials there. We can also find those on YouTube if you join at the All Access Pass level and higher. Likewise, you can get project files like this project file if you join up this month. So each month I've got new project files that become available, and they roll through on a monthly basis and become unavailable when the month ends. So if you want a monthly project file dump, go join up on Patreon. Check that out. It's at the 2nd tier and up over there. So special thanks to everybody that supports this channel already on YouTube and over on Patreon. Thanks so much. And thanks to you for watching all the way to the end. That's awesome. High five. Thanks. I'll catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, have a fantastic week. See ya.